Easy now, she's a bit skittish today. I see that. Good girl, settle down.
Dust rolled across the auction yard in thick, restless spirals, stinging eyes and settling into every crease of worn leather and tired skin. The afternoon sun burned low and heavy over Abilene, turning the sky the color of rusted iron. Men gathered in loose circles, boots grinding gravel, voices rough from cattle drives and cheap whiskey. The air smelled of sweat, hay, and desperation, the kind that hung around places where living things were bought and sold. Caleb Turner stood at the far edge of the crowd, hat pulled low, fingers hooked through his belt loops to hide the way they trembled. He wasn't trembling from fear. He was trembling from counting the same 3 coins in his pocket over and over again. 3 silver dollars. That was all the money he had in the world. He hadn't come for a fine horse. He hadn't come for pride. He'd come because walking everywhere with supplies slung over his shoulder was wearing him down, and winter would not be kind to a man on foot. The strong horses were paraded first, broad-chested stallions with glossy coats and sharp eyes. Bidding rose fast and loud. Ranchers elbowed one another. A few younger cowboys tried to look wealthier than they were. Caleb didn't move. He knew those animals were beyond him. They belonged to men with fences stretching miles wide and barns that didn't leak when it rained. Then the noise thinned. Near the broken fence at the edge of the yard stood a mare no one bothered to untie. Her head hung low. Her brown coat was so dull it seemed gray beneath the dust. Every rib pressed against her skin like fingers from the inside. One hind leg quivered, threatening to buckle each time she shifted her weight. A couple of boys laughed as they passed her. That one's halfway to the grave already. The auctioneer barely cleared his throat. Next lot, trail mare, no promises, might pull a plow, might pull you into a hole. Who will start? Silence. Even the wind seemed uninterested. Caleb felt something twist in his chest. He recognized the look in her eyes, not wild, not mean, just braced, like she expected the world to hit her again. He stepped forward before he could talk himself out of it. I'll give $2. Heads turned. A ripple of amusement spread through the yard. $2, the auctioneer repeated, smirking. Anyone want to outbid the generous gentleman? No one did. The gavel struck the wood with a dry crack. Sold. A few men shook their heads as Caleb walked up. One muttered, waste of coin. Another said, you get more use out of firewood. Caleb ignored them. He handed over 2 of his 3 silver dollars and reached for the rope. The mare flinched at first touch, muscles tightening beneath paper-thin skin. Easy, he murmured softly. Ain't here to harm you. Her ears twitched. She didn't pull away again. Up close he could see the scars. Old lash marks, thin and pale, crossing her flank. A brand had been burned into her hide long ago, but it looked as though someone had tried to alter it. The edges were uneven, angry-looking. He frowned but said nothing. He led her away slowly, careful not to rush her fragile steps. It took nearly an hour to reach his small patch of land outside town, a crooked cabin with a roof patched by mismatched boards and a corral that leaned like it had given up standing straight. The sun was dipping when they arrived. Caleb filled a trough with water first. The mare lowered her head cautiously, as if expecting it to disappear. When it didn't, she drank in slow, careful gulps. That's it, he whispered. Take your time. He soaked oats in a bucket so they soften. He didn't have much feed stored, but he poured nearly half of it in anyway. Hunger he understood. Hunger made everything feel sharper, crueler. She ate like she wasn't sure the food wouldn't be taken away mid-bite. He set to work with a rag and warm water, cleaning the dirt from her wounds. Each time he touched a scar, she tensed, but she didn't kick, didn't bite, didn't resist. Someone worked you too hard, he muttered under his breath. He'd known men like that, men who saw strength and used it until it broke. When night fell, the prairie grew quiet except for distant coyotes. Caleb spread an old blanket in the corral and leaned against the fence. He didn't trust her to lie down alone. He didn't trust the world not to take advantage of her again. The mare stood in the corner at first, eyes wide at every shifting shadow. "You can rest," he told her softly. "I'll keep watch." He meant it. The first 2 nights were much the same. She barely moved except to drink or eat. Her leg trembled less each day, though, and a faint shine returned to her coat after he brushed her carefully. On the third morning, when he stepped out with fresh water, she lifted her head before he spoke. On the fourth, she nudged his shoulder lightly as he checked her hooves. He smiled despite himself. "Guess you're still fighting." He named her Mercy that afternoon. It felt right, not because she needed pity, but because she had survived something without losing her gentleness. By the end of the week, Mercy's steps grew steadier. She followed him along the fence without the rope, ears flicking toward his voice. When he laughed quietly at something only he found amusing, she flicked her tail as if sharing the joke. Caleb began to feel something dangerous growing inside him. Hope. It had been a long time since he allowed himself that. On the 7th day, just after dawn, Mercy did something that made his breath catch. She trotted. It wasn't graceful, it wasn't fast, but it was strong. The trembling leg held firm, her stride stretched farther than before, muscles awakening beneath her skin. Caleb leaned against the fence, heart pounding. "Look at you," he whispered. The sound of distant hoofbeats cut through the morning stillness. He stiffened. 3 riders crested the hill leading toward his cabin, dark against the rising sun. They rode in formation, slow, deliberate, not drifters, not traders. Men who knew exactly where they were going. Caleb stepped out of the corral, wiping his hands on his trousers. Mercy moved closer behind him, pressing her shoulder near his back as if sensing the shift in the air. The riders stopped just outside the fence. The tallest one dismounted first. His coat was long and black despite the growing heat. His boots were polished. His eyes were colder than the steel at his hip. "You the man bought a bay mare at auction last week?" he asked, voice calm and measured. Caleb didn't answer immediately. He studied the man's posture, the easy way his hand hovered near his holster, the confidence that came from never having been told no. "Depends who's asking," Caleb replied evenly. The man's lips curved into a smile that never reached his eyes. "Name's Harlan Crow." The name settled heavy in Caleb's chest. Everyone knew Harlan Crow, rancher, landowner, the kind of man who could ruin a family with a single decision. Stories followed him like dust, none of them kind. Caleb kept his stance relaxed. "What about it?" Crow's gaze shifted past him to the corral, to Mercy. "That mare," Crow said softly, "she's mine." Mercy's ears flattened. Caleb felt heat rise behind his ribs. She was sold fair. "She wasn't meant to be. Looked unwanted to me." Crow stepped closer to the fence, boots crunching against gravel. "She carries something valuable." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "She carried scars when I got her." A flicker of irritation passed across Crow's face before disappearing again. "I'll give you $20. $20. Caleb's mind betrayed him for half a second, calculating what that money could fix. Roof, feed, a proper saddle, warm blankets before winter. Mercy shifted behind him, pressing closer. He shook his head slowly. "She ain't for sale." The 2 men on horseback exchanged glances. Crow's voice lowered, losing its polite edge. "You're a poor man. Don't act like you can afford pride." Caleb met his stare. "And you're a rich one. Don't act like that means you own everything." Silence tightened between them. Crow studied him longer this time, as if measuring how much trouble he would be to break. Finally he stepped back. "You'll reconsider." He mounted smoothly, adjusting his gloves. Before turning away, he looked once more at Mercy. "I always reclaim what belongs to me." The riders left as slowly as they'd arrived, dust trailing behind them like a warning. Caleb didn't move, until they disappeared over the hill. Only then did he let out the breath he'd been holding. He turned toward Mercy. She stood tall now, eyes alert, not weak, not dying. Whatever Crow thought he owned, it wasn't just a worn-out mare. And Caleb knew, deep in his bones, that buying her for $2 had just cost him far more than money. The dust from the riders had barely settled before the prairie felt different. Caleb stood by the fence long after Harlan Crow and his men disappeared over the hill. The morning sun had climbed higher, warming the boards of the corral, but a chill remained under Caleb's skin. He had seen the look in Crow's eyes. That wasn't a man who made idle threats. That was a man who collected what he claimed: land, cattle, people's silence. Mercy nudged his shoulder, softer than before but steady. He turned and ran his hand down her neck. The dullness that had once coated her was fading. Beneath the dust and old scars, muscle was returning. Life was returning. "Seems you're worth more than I thought," he murmured. He examined the brand on her flank again. The original mark had been burned deep, but someone had tried to alter it, lines twisted into something new. Underneath, barely visible where the hair grew thinner, was a second mark. Smaller, cleaner, older. 2 brands. That wasn't an accident. By afternoon, Caleb made up his mind. Waiting for Crow to return on his terms would be foolish. If Mercy carried a secret, he needed to know it before Crow decided to take it by force. He saddled her slowly. She shifted at first, unused to weight, but she didn't fight him. When he tightened the cinch, her ears flicked back, then forward again. "You sure about this girl?" he asked quietly. Mercy stepped forward on her own. They rode toward town at a cautious pace. Caleb didn't push her. He let her choose the rhythm. Each step looked stronger than the last. The limp that once worried him was gone entirely now. People noticed. By the time they reached the edge of Abilene, heads turned. A few men leaned against the saloon porch, eyes narrowing as Caleb rode past. "That the same mare from the auction," someone muttered. "She don't look near dead now." Caleb kept his gaze forward. He stopped in front of the blacksmith's shop, where old Samuel Reed stood hammering iron against an anvil. Sparks flew bright against the dim interior. Samuel paused when he saw the brand. "Well now," the blacksmith muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. "Where'd you get her?" "Auction," Caleb replied. "Last week." Samuel stepped closer, squinting at Mercy's flank. His rough fingers hovered near the scarred mark but didn't touch. "That there's Crow's ranch brand," he said quietly. "Or what used to be." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Used to be." Samuel nodded. "He's been changing marks lately, buying up smaller spreads, erasing what was there before." "And the second brand?" Caleb asked. Samuel's expression darkened. "That ain't Crow." "Whose is it?" The blacksmith hesitated. He glanced toward the street as if expecting someone to be listening. "Belonged to Tom Whitaker," he said at last. The name meant little to Caleb. Never heard of him. "Most folks don't anymore," Samuel replied grimly. Whitaker had land west of Crow's property, refused to sell, said his father broke that ground with his bare hands. Few months back his barn caught fire. Cattle scattered. Debts piled up overnight. He disappeared soon after. Caleb felt a slow burn rising in his chest. "You think Crow had something to do with it?" Samuel didn't answer directly. "I think Whitaker had horses strong as iron, and I think this mare looks like one of them." Mercy shifted, as if the name stirred something in her memory. "Whitaker had a prized bloodline," Samuel continued. "Fast, enduring, smart. Crow wanted it, couldn't get it cheap." "And now?" Samuel stepped back, lowering his voice. "Now Whitaker's land belongs to Crow, and any stock left alive carries a different mark." Caleb absorbed the weight of it. Mercy wasn't just any horse. She was proof. Proof that something had been taken, that something had survived. Before he could respond, a familiar shadow fell across the shop entrance. "Crow," He stood in the doorway, hat casting his eyes in darkness. Two of his riders flanked him outside. "I was hoping you'd come to town," Crow said calmly. The hammer in Samuel's hand froze midair. Caleb dismounted slowly, placing himself between Crow and Mercy, just getting her checked. Crow's gaze slid past him to the mare. For a moment, something flickered there, not anger. Concern. "She don't belong to you," Crow said softly. "She was sold. She was stolen property." Samuel inhaled sharply but said nothing. Caleb kept his voice steady. "From who?" Crow's jaw tightened slightly. "From a man who couldn't manage what he owned." "Whitaker?" Caleb asked deliberately. The name hung heavy between them. Crow's eyes sharpened. "Careful." "Did he sell her?" Caleb pressed. Crow stepped closer. "He forfeited his rights when he failed to pay his debts." "So you took his land, his cattle, his horses?" "I protected my investments," Crow replied coolly. Mercy stamped her hoof. Crow's gaze flicked to her leg, studying it. "She was injured when I acquired her," he said. "Would have died without proper care." Caleb almost laughed. "Funny. She started healing the moment she left your hands." The two riders outside shifted, hands brushing near their holsters. Samuel set his hammer down slowly, the clang echoing too loud in the silence. Crow's tone changed, less patient now. "I offered you $20, I'll make it 50. $50. It was more money than Caleb had seen in a single place in years. "Why?" Caleb asked quietly. "Why is she worth 50 to you?" Crow's eyes hardened. "Because I decide what's mine." "No," Caleb said evenly. "Because she's Whitaker's bloodline, and if folks see she's alive and strong, they'll start asking questions." The air seemed to thin. Crow stepped so close Caleb could smell the leather of his gloves. "You're stepping into matters that don't concern you." "She concerns me," Caleb replied. For a long moment, neither man moved. Then Crow did something unexpected. He smiled. "You think a horse can change anything?" he asked softly. "Land deeds are signed, witnesses forget, men disappear." "Not all of them," Caleb answered. Crow's eyes narrowed slightly. "You planning to be a hero?" Caleb shook his head. "Just planning to keep what I bought." Crow studied him one last time, calculating again. Finally he stepped back. "You've got spirit," he said. "I'll give you that." He adjusted his cuffs calmly. "But spirit don't stop bullets." The threat was plain. Crow turned toward his men. Before mounting, he looked at Mercy once more. "She won't stay with you," he said quietly. "Everything bends eventually." They rode off, slower this time, confident. Samuel exhaled only after they vanished. "You just made an enemy that swallows towns," he muttered. Caleb stroked Mercy's neck. She stood tall, ears forward, unafraid. "Maybe towns bend," Caleb said quietly, "but not everything does." He looked west, toward the land that once belonged to Whitaker. If Mercy truly came from that ranch, then somewhere out there might still be records, neighbors, someone who remembered. Crow believed fear would silence the truth. But fear had already tried to break Mercy. And she had survived. Caleb mounted again, feeling the strength beneath him as Mercy shifted her weight, ready. As they rode out of town, whispers followed. A poor cowboy and a once-dying horse. Against the most ruthless man in the West. The odds were laughable. But as Mercy broke into a smooth, powerful gallop beyond the town's edge, Caleb felt something stronger than doubt rise in his chest. Not hope. Defiance.